What's up, everybody? Andy Boderman from Barbecue with Boderman here. A couple weeks ago, I put out a question on my social media asking people what was one thing they really wanted to try cooking but were either too afraid to do it or didn't know how to do it. And overwhelmingly, the response came back beef Wellington. So I am going to be doing basically the Gordon Ramsay method with a couple of my own tweaks in there. But I will walk you through step by step and we'll get this put together. So this is a full beef tenderloin. What we're going to use for a beef Wellington is what they call a center cut, meaning I am going to take about this much out. Now this end and this end are still really, really good meat. So we're going to keep those for doing steaks and stuff like that. But for the beef Wellington, we're concentrated right in here. The other thing is we're going to need to trim this up. Comes out with a lot of fat. So I'm going to start trimming it. A lot of it, you can just get your fingers underneath and pull. So I do have a boning knife from Wusthof. This thing's awesome. And that will help me get in with the silver skin and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna trim this up really quick. That's about as far as I want to go with this one. I could definitely spend a bunch more time and really get in there, but I'm an advocate of fat as flavor. So if there's a little bit of this, some of this fat in here, a lot of this is going to render. So this will be great. Now that we have the center cut done, we're going to shape this thing a little bit so it looks a little bit more cylindrical instead of being kind of square the way it is right now. And then we're just going to kind of tightly roll this, keeping pressure on. And then like little candies, pinch at the end and roll. You want as much pressure in there as possible. So this is a nice cylindrical shape. I'm going to tuck these ends underneath like that. I'm going to throw that in the fridge for about a half an hour. So the first step in making the mushroom duxelles is you can either chop them finely by hand or you can be lazy like me and use a food processor. We got these finely diced. This is the texture that you're looking for. So this is 1.5 pounds of portobello mushrooms. Certainly if you have other mushrooms that are in season, you can definitely use those. There's some oil in here. I don't want to use butter because we're doing a pretty high heat on this and I don't want it to burn. I'm also going to add in some fresh thyme and some salt and pepper. We have been cooking this down for about 15-ish minutes. We're getting real close to done. You'll notice how much it reduced down. For the crepe, we're going to be using 1 cup of flour, just all-purpose flour works. We're going to be using a cup of milk, 2 eggs, about a tablespoon or teaspoon of chives, and also some thyme, some fresh thyme, salt, and pepper. If you've never used fresh thyme, you want to take the single stalk, turn it around backwards so that the leaves are pointing up, and you just put a little bit of pressure with your finger and thumb and just pull down and you'll be able to strip off every last one of those. Once that's mixed in, we're going to set it in the fridge for about 30 minutes, let that batter set and get that herb flavor mixed in nice before we actually go to cook them. Bam! So I am cooking these on medium heat. You don't want to go too high. Like I said, we're avoiding that brown. We don't really want it to brown. We want to keep it nice and bright. They go pretty quick. This tenderloin has been wrapped and in the fridge while we were working on everything else, so now it's time to season this up. So we're gonna throw some coarse salt and some coarse pepper on here, all the way around. Once it's wrapped up, you can't season it any further, so it's super key that you get your seasoning done right now. All right, we got cast iron running at medium-high heat. You can see the smoke coming off it a little bit. We're gonna run 1 minute per side to sear this thing before we wrap it up. After about 2 minutes, about halfway through the cook, I like to throw a little bit of butter, garlic, rosemary, and thyme. And you're gonna hear that thyme popping a little bit. And once that butter melts, then you can start basting this whole thing. The reason you don't want to put the butter in right away is because we're dealing with a hot pan and you will burn the butter, and that is not a good flavor. So each end, 1 minute, so you get a good sear all the way around. So now we're gonna let this rest for a little while, but I also don't want to neglect these juices that we got in the pan. They're absolutely delicious. You have that butter, all the herbs, and then the beef juice that mixed in there. So we're gonna throw that on top. Pardon me. We're gonna throw some Dijon mustard on here while it's still warm. You want this mustard to kind of melt into it a little bit. It's gonna give it a little bit of flavor, but it's also gonna help with the tenderness. Now that we have browned the beef tenderloin, we have to square up the crepes in order to make the wrap. So we have all of our components done now. We've got the mushroom duxelle, we've got the herb crepes, we've actually browned the tenderloin itself, and I brought in some prosciutto. So the thing to do next is get yourself a nice flat surface and get some cling wrap. What I like to do is basically cover the entire surface with a little bit of an overlap in the middle. We're gonna take our crepes and we squared them up. Basically gonna make a grid here. We're gonna cover all of this with prosciutto. Then you get to eat any bonus pieces of prosciutto. Now, we're gonna take our mushroom duxelle, we're gonna spoon it in, and we're looking for probably a 1/4 inch layer across the entire thing. We have our 3 layers. We have the herb crepe, we have prosciutto, and then we have the mushroom duxelle. Now we're gonna take our rested beef tenderloin, the center cut. We're gonna put that right in the center. And then this is probably the most challenging part of this, is to wrap this thing up and make sure that you get even coverage. So use the cling wrap to lift up and over, and then pull it back a little bit, and like you're making a big old burrito, kind of tuck in the front side of it and spin it. And as you're going, you're pulling back the cling wrap until you get it all the way around, and then bring the cling wrap back over the top. And then, much like we did earlier, we're gonna fold that in, crimp the edges, and then, like a candy, we're just gonna wrap this up and make it nice and tight. Now, once that is in there, we're gonna rest this in the fridge for about a half an hour to kind of let everything set before we get our puff pastry out. And then much like we did before, we're going to use the cling wrap to bring it up and over. And as soon as we get to this point, we're going to pull this back, tuck it in like a burrito, and then match it up. So we're going to cut across there, remove this portion of it, and then tuck it back in. Pull the plastic up, keep rolling till we're all the way around. And then the edges, just like we did before, we're gonna grab this whole thing, we're gonna wrap it like a piece of candy. What'll happen is the friction on the ends will actually heat this up and kind of make it melt into itself. So we have a nice cylindrical piece like that. Tuck these under, and then we're gonna refrigerate this one more time for probably 5 to 10 minutes. Let this seal up. This is kind of the fun part where you get to be a little bit creative. Take the back side of the knife and you score the top like so. The last thing you're gonna do is I have 2 egg yolks beaten in here, and I'm gonna egg wash this whole thing to get that nice, beautiful golden brown color. Here it is, Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington. Gordon, if you see this and you didn't like what I did, just try to be nice.